Hi everyone, Richard here at Calvin Wazoo with another video, and this is another installment in the ongoing series Frank Zappa, one album at a time. And today we are going to talk about Zappa in New York and a little bit more about why I put that little slip of paper in with this particular issue. Yes, this is official release number 23. It's a 2 LP live set that was released in March of 1978 on Discreet Records. And the Zappa Records CD was released in August of 2012. And can you... No, I guess you can't see it. It's above my head here. I also have, there was the 40th anniversary release CD box set, which I have. And then, of course, there is, well, let's see, where is it? It's this one here. The Zappa Records release also. The 40th anniversary box set, which is a triple album release. So more material, a little bit more about that in a moment. It was recorded in New York City at the Palladium, which was a venue that Zappa played quite a bit, especially for his famous Halloween shows. And they were the shows that were recorded in December 26th to December 29th in 1976. So this didn't get released until, March 1978. There's a lot of stuff going on here with this. So interestingly, just some more regarding the, the specific datum or whatever about the record. The cover art, this is one in which Frank had like total control, I guess you could say, in terms of, he wasn't just controlling the design of the album cover. He and parts of his family were involved in creating the design, the art for that. It wasn't like he was telling, Cal Schenkel, who did a lot of the cover art for many of his releases, this is what I want you to do. It was, he was much closer to that. So, for example, we've got this photo that was taken by then 6-year-old Dweezil Zappa. That's a view of 10th Avenue in snow there. Kind of, a new feeling perhaps for 10th Avenue freeze out. And then the other photos that are from the show that you can see, with these were photos that were taken by Gail. So it was quite the family affair in putting together the artwork for the album. Now, there are several issues of this album, and there are many issues with the release. So we've got, what is normally considered as the original release that was from March of 1978, as I said, on the Discreet label. However, this isn't the real original release. There was an earlier release that got recalled, and that's this one that I have, which is why I have this little insert that I threw in with the sleeve, saying, hey, this is the uncensored original. So there were a few hundred copies or so of this release that was accidentally perhaps released by Warner Brothers and then were subsequently recalled. I'll have a little more information on how that happened momentarily. And then, of course, there was the 40th anniversary reissues. But as I have intimated, there were many issues with the recording. And it's really sort of launches the problems that Frank was having with Warner Brothers, the Warner Brother label. And it has a lot to do with Frank's project at the time that became known as Leather. And some other issues came out of this recording as well that are more related to Frank's hubris. So I'm going to try and go through this material and this information as quickly as I can, but I am anticipating this might be kind of a long video. I apologize, for that. I've got several other sources here to kind of help with this, because the true story of what was going on is not that clear. In some of the issues going on here, because in some areas Frank says one thing and then others in other areas say something different. And Frank himself, it doesn't always say the same, doesn't always remember how things occurred exactly the same way. And this is a common trait with people. I mean, for example, Frank, when he was sort of like the manager or the MC for the Emojis Festival in Belgium, in a lot of places, he's quoted as saying that he has no recollection of ever playing with Pink Floyd or with Caravan, despite the fact that there are recordings of him playing with them in existence. And then there are other places where he says, this is what happened in this particular situation. And then later he's quoted, even within his own book, he'll say something, slightly different. And as I say, that's not necessarily something unique to Frank. We always misremember things. And in fact, in a couple of my recent videos, I was talking about the band Toe. And I mentioned in one video, this is the real situation, that I had ordered this album and was waiting for this album by Toe to come in the mail when I saw another iteration, a color variant, for sale in a store. And I bought the one in the store because I hardly ever see this record, or in fact, I never saw this record. And then the other one came, in the mail. And then in another video after that one, that specifically I'm talking about the band Toe, I say that I got the two different albums, because I saw them at two different times, in two different stores. That's we do that. People think that their memory is infallible. Oh yeah, the way I remember things. But no, we misremember things a lot as our mind refines and rediscusses within our head about what happened. If you haven't had the experience, you will when you're talking with friends about some event that you both were experiencing at the same time, and you'll say something and then the other person will go, well, no, that I remember it differently, so we have to keep that in mind with a lot of information about Frank Zappa and his material, that there are going to be variations in the facts. Okay, so let's get started here with the hubris that began developing, or I shouldn't say began developing, the hubris was always there with Frank. It starts to manifest itself in a much more blatant manner, I believe, about the time of the release, Zappa in New York. Now, the problems with the record company are really complicated in some respects. One of the issues was about a song, all right, that was on this original, all right, that was removed from subsequent pressings. In fact, this was recalled when it was first released, and that song was Punky's Whips. So this is a song story that is about Terry Bozzio, the drummer with Frank on this tour, and his infatuation with Punky Meadows, who was a lead guitarist with this hair band known as Angel. It's a hard rock band at that time that dressed, everyone in the band dressed all in white. And in fact, in 1976, the magazine Circus named, the readers of that magazine Circus named Angel the best new group. So considering, if you know anything about Circus, it had tended to cater to a teeny bopper, music fan crowd. And so Angel was a very big band, very popular band with a very, very young audience. So the song, is kind of began with this. The story goes that Terry Bozzio found this photo of Punky Meadows in a Japanese magazine of him with his famous pooched out lips, photo. Wish I had an example of that photo. And there was this mild infatuation that Bozzio had, which Frank took advantage of, as he was well known to do. If you ever told any personal story in your life with Frank around, that story would find its way into a song. And anyway, so they wrote this song that was basically a story of Bozzio being sexually enamored with Meadows. And so let's see, I got some notes here. So there's this Washington City paper interview from May 31st of 2002, and in which they say that it's this mock tribute to the, quote, pooched out succulent of his, Punky Meadows, insolent pouting rictus. So Punky Meadows was flattered by the song, and this article is actually from an interview with Punky Meadows in 2002. And, Punky Meadows was flattered by the song, but the rest of the band's members of Angel, they didn't like it. So, but what Punky Meadows did is he signed a release, and gave it to Frank, and giving him permission to do the song. But he didn't sign a release with Warner Brothers. Okay, so what Frank did, this was all kind of tied together, as I said, with material that was going to be released under the name of Leather. Okay, so Frank, and a lot of this information I'm getting from Barry Miles' biography, about this. Frank delivered all this material, all right? And what he was going to do is he gave them this tape to meet this contract for 4 units. And what he was going to expect, he was going to release them wanted them released individually as Studio 10, Hot Rats 3, Zappa's Orchestral Favorites, and then Live in New York. And he handed that over to Warner Brothers, and he expected to get paid right away because that was in the contract. I deliver the material, you pay me. And they said, well, no, give me 10 days. Give us 10 days. And then it became a couple of weeks. Then it became a couple of months. And still nothing. Up to 6 months later, Frank then believed that, well, the copyright is going back to me. I am free to do whatever I want with this material. So he started to repackage it as this 4-record set, which was to be known as 4 or 5 record set. Actually a 4-record set, because while the Live in New York that he had delivered to Warner Brothers was a double album, he cut it down to 1 album to go with the other 3. So it was going to be like a 4-record set. I think that's how it went. And so he began shopping around for another record company to release it. And then Warner Brothers stepped in and said, no, 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 you can't do that. And the reason then at the time was that material on his release that he gave them, I don't know if they even knew what they had, that was in the Live in New York, that was going to be put into leather. They said, well, no, that's part of this Live in New York you gave us. Can't do that. So boom, lawsuit happens. And so in all the midst of the fighting, Warner Brothers apparently, started raising objections about the material on Live in New York, and particular Punky's whips. They objected to that. They also objected to the song Titties and Beer, which is the opener to the album, to the double album that was eventually released. So, and they objected to that because they thought it was pornographic, okay? And so Zappa is like, no, you can't do this. I have complete artistic control over my material, yada, 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 yada. So Warner Brothers still continued to drag their feet about all of this. And then, which that's why, we've got a concert recording, from 1 year, and then it's like, go back again here because I'm forgetting. Yeah, we've got a concert recording from 1976 that doesn't get released until 1978. So, and then what happened is that they initially pressed and then let go out these copies with Punky's whips on the recording. And also a longer version of, I think it was I Promise Not to Come in Your Mouth, and then a longer version also of Titties and Beer, perhaps. Anyway, they went out by mistake, mostly to critics and reviewers and to some stores. And from my looking into things, it appears that most of these copies went to Europe and were not initially distributed in the US. That may be not the case. There may have been some copies released in the US. I'm just not aware of any in particular. Because for me to get my copy, I essentially needed to shop in Germany in order to find one. So they got recalled, and then the official release was then went out that had Punky's whips removed and parts of these other songs edited. So Punky's Whips, it's a silly song, and there's really nothing too untoward, I think, with it. And there seems to be plenty of evidence that Punky Meadows really had no issues, with it. But there were a couple other songs that were on the recording that really got Frank in some hot water. And overall, the entire record was being reviled for its sexist and explicit lyrics. One of those songs was Titties and Beer, which Barry Miles says in the biography is really a stupid song rather than an offensive song. But TDs and beer is something that rock music reviewer and critic at that time, Susan Shapiro, really went after Frank about. She wrote for Rolling Stone and for some other, magazines. And she went after Frank for his overall misogynistic presentation and his own personal misogyny. Now, Punky's Whips initially was cut by Warner Brothers because they feared a lawsuit. Now, so apparently there was no lawsuit filed, but they feared it was libelous and it would result in a lawsuit. In spite of Punky Meadows signing the document, remember the rest of the band and Angel was not happy with that. So there may have been some other undisclosed conversations between their representatives and Warner Brothers outside of any communication that Punky Meadows had with Frank. But Susan Shapiro, really went after Frank regarding titties and beer. And then, I had some notes about this. Well, I didn't put those notes down here about Susan Shapiro, but it went through this long discussion where she had it. I might have it in here. Yeah, there was an exchange between Shapiro and so this, again, his hubris and his own personal misogyny really comes out. So critic Susan Shapiro accused him of womb envy. She felt insulted by titties and beer. Zappa replied, that particular song was born to be a classic because it has everything in it that America loves, and that's beer and tits. Shapiro told him that she didn't like either of those things, and she represented 51% of the population. Frank admitted that he didn't like beer either, but added, you should see the response to that song in Texas. It's stunning. Tits are amusing. Well, she continued, and I'm not sure if this was done in person or if it was done through the press or, she would write something and then he would respond elsewhere. But her continued response ended up putting Frank on the defensive. And then, so he got a little more in her face in his responses. Look, this is quote, look, if you're going to grow those things and go out and buy brassieres to make them stick out even more, you deserve what you get. If you don't like them, you can have them chopped off. There are some cases where people bind them down. If you want to de-emphasize yourself, go right ahead. But if you got them, you got to appreciate that all those other people who get different plumbing view these protuberances in a way, appurtenances, not protuberances, appurtenances in a way other than you view them. So, he's starting to get angry in his response. And then he's also adopting the default cisgendered male attitude and sexist attitude that, because we're men and this is how we function, that it's okay for us to act and behave like this. So yeah, this is a point where some of the subtle inferences that you may find in Zappa's music and lyrics that allude to misogyny are really starting to become, exposed. Now, so there's the other song that's very problematic. And even with many, many, many diehard fans, Zappa diehard fans, including myself. And that's the song, the Illinois Enema Bandit. Now, the fellow known as Shaggy over at the Opinionated Hippie, in his review of Zappa in New York, he just, he won't talk about it. He just says it's a song that I don't need to hear. I don't need to hear this. And it's one that, to be frankly honest, caused me not ambivalence, but it caused me it raised conflict, all right? Because it has this line in there, it's kind of like the chorus, about the Illinois Enema Bandit. I hear he's on the loose. And I always thought that was so clever, that line. The way the words and the way it was written in the context of the song. However, when we look at the totality of the song, it's a song about a serial burglar and serial rapist. And it's a song in which Frank takes very graphic sexual assault, real life sexual assault, and turns it into comedic fare. And in fact, when he discovered it, it was basically a blurb in a newspaper. It's a real case that happened in Illinois in the Champaign-Urbana area, which is a college town, all right, University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. He rewrote that trial transcript for the song so that he could portray the women victims as clamoring for the perpetrator, Michael Kenyon, for the perp's release and leniency from the court. So he was kind of like using a Stockholm syndrome, I think that's the right term, interpretation of this. All right? But it's sexual assault, and he's turning it into a joke. So let me read from the Barry Miles book about this. All Zappa's deep-seated problems with women come out in this song. His limitations are revealed. Though based on fact, he rewrites the court case so that the victims clamor for Kenyon's release. The subtext is that all victims of sexual assault secretly love it. And and this too, the humorous celebratory tone of the song reveals someone threatened by female sexuality. The old Sicilian patriarch in Zappa hated it when educated women, often more intelligent than him, dismissed his Stone Age attitude. This is where I actually started to, initially my thoughts were where it was with later recordings that this part of Zappa was manifesting itself more openly. And it really is happening with this record. So we go on here. I get in my note here that, Frank was really never one to hedge his bets. So while he was performing in England and Britain, going on to the notion of feminists and feminism, he was asked about the feminist reaction to his material. And what he does is, in his response, is he takes a swing at punk rock, okay? And he says, I'm saying simply this: it's as much of a hype as punk rock. Some of the things they, punk rockers, want to achieve are quite noble, but I resent the manner in which they are being advertised. It's not the ideals, it's the packaging. I find it repulsive and think it's an insult to men and demeaning to women. Okay? So this is his response in that he's, I don't know, is he trying to walk back what he said? Is he, has he turned the corner, and feeling that, he's changing his ways? Because that's really a bit ironic when you consider what Frank says in his autobiography, The Real Frank Zappa book, in which he says, quote, "If you were to take all the lyrics I've ever written and analyze how many songs are about women in demeaning positions as opposed to men in demeaning positions, you would find that most of the songs are about stupid men. The songs I write about women are not gratuitous attacks on them, but statements of fact." So the old hubris, is coming back. I mean, and it's not like this isn't a subject that he hasn't, touched on in the past. I mean, if we go all the way back to Absolutely Free, and you've got the song Brown Shoes Don't Make It, which I think is a brilliant song. However, even though the song talks about incest, it is, and also sex with minors, it is a song that is revealing and exposing the hubris and the cover-ups of government, local government, city hall, and the twisted manipulations that occur when people are in positions of power. All right. And certainly also, if you know anything about Frank and the way he ran his musicians, and he had some, power issues. And then there are other songs too where it seems like he might be misappropriating women in sex, let's say with a song like The Torture Never Stops, because you've got the sounds of this woman moaning and screaming but very, very, it's a moan and scream, not of necessarily of agony or terror, but, one of pleasure, juxtaposed with the concept of the song, which is about, South American dictators torturing people. To me, again, that's kind of a clever juxtaposition, because it's, again, not uncommon in literature and in film. I mean, Stephen King, writes about it in one of the short stories from Different Seasons, about the boy who discovers that there's a former Nazi living in his neighborhood, and he starts asking him about the torturing that he did, and it becomes a sexual infatuation with the boy. And then, there are other stories, and, it's not an uncommon theme to make a connection between torture and sexual pleasure. So, on that, Frank is really not, different. Things get a little more twisted, I think, during the years of Flo and Eddie. In particular, the first time I really notice it is with this release, at the Fillmore's, which, by the way, I have on order, the huge box set, both on CD and vinyl. I have it on order, because I want it in my collection. Not that I'll probably listen to it more than the one time after I get it. But we're talking about the song in particular. I always get mixed up if it's "Do You Like My New Car" or if it's it's "Do You Like My New Car." And again, what he's doing is in that song, he also turned sexual assault into a joke. And it was a real sexual assault because, in the big note, we've got Howard Kalin admitting and telling the story to Frank about this time where he hooked up with this underage girl, in which he says, quote, "So the year probably would have been around 67. She was not even 17. All right. So in many states, in some states, the age of consent is 16. All right. But this is 1967. In most states, the age of consent was 18. So, he's telling this story that basically he committed statutory rape. He's telling the story to Frank, and Frank is like, that's pretty good. That's funny. We'll turn it into a song. And then it becomes, part of the tour. The song Magdalena is fictitious. It's completely fictitious. But again, it's really a, and I'm torn with that one. I really like the song Magdalena. Again, the musical structure of the song, I think is really, really quite fantastic. But it's still cringy when you think about it. I mean, even though it's fictitious, like From Absolutely Free, Brown Shoes Don't Make It, it's a song that, is showing this other side of Frank. And I do believe that side really starts to exhibit itself on this release. So, those are the issues with this record in terms of, its content. But then there are some other issues that I agree with Shaggy at the Opinionated Hippie in his review, is that, there are some really great songs on here, but the order in which they are presented just doesn't work. And while there are some really fantastic songs on here, the Black Page, the Purple Lagoon, others on here that are really fantastic songs. The way they're edited for the album, and also the presentation in the order. It's not like a regular set list. The album opens with Titties and Beer. And, I haven't been to like dozens or more Frank Zappa concerts, but I've been to plenty of Frank Zappa concerts, and I've been to plenty of other concerts. And bands do not tend to open their shows with complex songs that, you don't want to fuck up while you're performing. All right. They tend to open with, simpler songs, that allows the band to get used to the sound that's on stage, hearing in their monitors, making sure they're in tune, that kind of thing. A lot of shows, Frank would open with the Chunga's Revenge, guitar solo. Perfect type of song to open a show with, because it gives him a chance to test out his guitar and his own monitor, with the band, etc. Opening a show with Titties and Beer, I don't think so. I don't think that's how it would happen. So it's a very disjointed assembly of the songs, from the show. So, by and large, I've got all the different iterations of this release, in my collection, because I just want to have, all the iterations of the releases that I can find. But it's not one that I pull out and listen to. In fact, hardly ever. Because I'm not one to pull out an album and then go directly to just one or two songs to listen to that are my favorite songs. I want to play the album through, and this one just it's like clangy. It's very jarring. So if there are just particular songs that I want to hear, then what I'll do is I'll get the CD, and then I can jump to the CD, and then listen to that particular song, or jump around much easier than I can with the album. So, there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Zappa in New York. I mean, when it first came out, I really liked it. And I will admit, all right, that when it first came out, I was in college. I think we're talking 1978. So I would have been a sophomore in college, I believe. And, I got the record and, I liked it. And I didn't think, I'm like 20 years old, 19, 20 years old. And I'm not really thinking about it. And I grew up in a rural area. I wasn't a very sophisticated, undergrad. And so didn't really think about a lot of these things. And in the Flo and Eddie years, I was 14, 15 years old, and I was like, this is great stuff. And, now in my, I don't think it's so great anymore. While there's still some really wonderful material in those releases. I'm sometimes embarrassed that I was so enthusiastic about some of the songs, and rightfully embarrassed. So yeah, Zappa in New York marks for me this turning point, because roughly beginning with the jazz fusion albums of Waka Jawaka and the Grand Wazoo, and going from there, we're getting this stretch, a remarkable stretch of recordings. And then we come up to this one. And there's still a couple good recordings that are going to come later. But then we come up to this one, and now the real Frank Zappa is manifesting himself in a more blatant manner. And hubris is just the best word for it. Because there are so many examples that one can quote in which, when he goes to explain himself, he's got self-justification down really excellently. Now, to me, though, he's still a musical and compositional genius. But his, there are some issues that I have, and I'm sure other people have as well, with his interpersonal relations with others and his overall view, of women in particular, and, with others. And I think Frank had this way of, he had a charisma and a persona that if you were someone within a targeted group, you wouldn't dare object to what he was planning on doing, even if you thought it was inappropriate or bad taste or just plain wrong, because there were so many other great things, that he was doing, and to be connected with him and the music he was creating, you wouldn't want to give that up, that you would compromise yourself. I can completely understand and relate to that. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts. Leave your own thoughts, yay or nay, in the comments down under. I appreciate this. I did manage to keep this under 45 minutes, so that's pretty good. And subscribe. Don't forget that I'm also on Instagram. However, my handle on Instagram is newsdude76, and that's NEWZDUDE76. And always remember to pray for the people inside your head, for they won't be there when you're dead.